Lord, the light of your love is shining in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm a minister with the Marquette Church of Christ, and today I want to talk to you about losing Jesus. Now, we've all lost things before. I am losing things constantly, it seems, and with 2 kids in the house, I am losing things more than I ever have before in my life. So it's a common issue we all run into. Sometimes you lose stuff. You lose your keys, you lose your socks. Normally you just lose one sock, right? You know where the other one is, and you can never find a match. You lose your phone. There's a member of our congregation, we kind of poke at him sometimes. He forgot his wife at a gas station one time. He lost her, Anyway, we've all lost stuff. But whatever you have lost, however bad it was, I guarantee you it is not as bad as what Mary and Joseph lost on the way from Jerusalem. They lost Jesus. They lost Jesus, the Son of the living God. They lost him. They basically had one job, right? Just keep him alive, get him to adulthood, and then he can conduct his ministry and everything would be well. And they lost him. 12 years into it, they lost him. Now, you haven't done that. Well, have you? The text we're looking at today is a fun one. It's in Luke chapter 2, verses 41 through 52. And this section of Scripture, it's fun to me. It shows a bit of the practical side of the Bible, the fact that there were regular, ordinary things that happened in the Bible. And, we tend to kind of abstractify everything. We think about these stories with this impossible stuff happening and, in just incredible ways. And that does certainly happen. But then you have these stories every now and then that just remind you that the Bible is following people that are human, right? And here you have a mother and a father who lose track of their son and are frantically searching for him. So this is Luke chapter 2, verses 41 through 52. Again, it's a fun passage, and it tends to be one that's, I think, it's one of those VBS passages that we often know the surface of really well, but there's so much into it if we really dig deep. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's start reading in verse 41. Now his parents, this is Jesus' parents, Mary and Joseph. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey. But then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem, searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. So let's run through the story again here. At the very beginning of this passage, in verse 41, it notes that Jesus' family routinely attended the Passover feast in Jerusalem. Now, this was the biggest festival of the year, the biggest memorial celebration of the year for the Jewish community. And the biggest of gatherings was, of course, in Jerusalem at the temple. Now, this was something that Mary and Joseph attended regularly. Many Jews in that time period would make the pilgrimage to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. Now, this was a celebration of what had happened in Exodus chapter 12, where God was trying to free the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, and he tells Moses and Aaron to go before the Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." Pharaoh refuses, and you have the 10 plagues ensue. In Exodus chapter 12, you have the 10th plague, which is when God passed through the land of Egypt and struck down the firstborn of every household, except for the households which had on its doorposts spread the blood of the lamb, or the blood of a lamb, I should say. And on those houses that had the blood of the lamb spread upon the doorposts, God would pass over those houses, right? Thus, Passover. So, Passover was a celebration of God's mercy, of God's grace, to free the people of Israel and to spare the firstborn of the Israelites. And here, Jesus' family was in Jerusalem celebrating this feast. They went every year, it says, but it makes a mention in verse 42, it makes a mention that Jesus was now 12 years old and he was attending the feast with them. Now, this is significant because prior to 12 years old, Jesus would not have been part of the regular festivities. If you were 11 years old or younger, if you went at all, which Jesus either was left behind in Galilee, or if he went with his family all the way to Jerusalem, he would have been relegated to somewhat of a kid's table, if you want to think about it that way, or kind of a daycare of sorts. But he wouldn't have been a part of the normal festival activities. But now he's 12 years old, so he is now a full participant in the festival activities. This is a big milestone for people in the Jewish community. And after the festival was ended, it says in verses 43 and 44, the family left, and Jesus stays behind. Now, I know that people here are a little harsh on Mary, right? Why would you leave and you didn't even know where Jesus was? Well, if your whole group was leaving, a group full of family and friends and cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and all of that, where would you assume Jesus was, right? Probably the best chance of finding him would be to go in that group. And this is a big group, by the way. So maybe they are looking for him from the very start. Whatever the case was, they make a day's journey, it says, and they finally realize one way or another, he's not there. He's not with them. And they decide to go back to Jerusalem. So they had made a day's journey out and a day's journey back. And then it makes a mention that they began searching in Jerusalem, and it says after 3 days they find Jesus. Now, it's not entirely clear if this is 3 days total or 3 days after they got to Jerusalem. So either 1 day away, 1 day of travel back, and then 1 day of searching in Jerusalem, or 1 day travel, 1 day back, and then 3 days of searching in Jerusalem. We'll get back to why that's kind of important in a second. But we know that they're, at least for 3 days, they don't know where Jesus is. Now, for you parents out there, how would you feel at this point? I mean, just think about it. Be honest. After 3 days of not knowing where your child is, maybe that's something that some of you have experienced. I mean, I can't imagine what that's like. It must be so terrifying. You're thinking about all the possibilities and what could have happened, what might have happened, where you might find him, if you'll find him at all. And so finally, when Joseph and Mary find Jesus, he's asking questions. He's listening to them, first of all. It says that he's listening to them, he's asking questions, and everybody is amazed at how much he knows about Scripture, right? That's really incredible. Again, we'll come back to that again more in a second. But he's there in the temple, and his parents finally find him. And Mary runs up to him with this understandably panicked accusation. Why have you treated us like this? And she actually makes a distinct reference to Joseph here, by the way, which is, as far as I know, the last chronological reference to Joseph in the Bible. Joseph is apparently around, the de facto father of Jesus, so to say. He's apparently around when Jesus is 12 years old. This is what Mary references here. But then there's not really any mention of him after this. We don't know what happened to Joseph. More than likely, he passed away sometime during Jesus' teenage or young adult years. But this is the last known reference to him. But Mary and Joseph, they go up to Jesus. Why have you treated us like this? We've been looking for you everywhere. And Jesus comes back with this response that's just confusing, right? I think that's the best way to describe it. He says, why were you looking for me? Why did you not know where I was? Didn't you know that I was going to be in my Father's house? And you have that interesting contrast. It's something you may not think about at first, but the verse earlier, like just before, it mentioned, your father and I have been looking for you, right? Joseph and Mary were looking for Jesus. It mentions this earthly father, Joseph, but then he makes this contrasting mention later, didn't you know that I was going to be in my Father's house? He doesn't say God's house. He says, in my Father's house. All right? And they don't get it. They're confused. Nonetheless, it says in verse 51, Jesus comes back with them to Nazareth. It does mention he is submissive to them. He didn't argue. He didn't say, no, I'm not going back with you. I don't want to do that. He didn't get mad at them for leaving him behind or anything. It just says that he was submissive to them. He went back with him to Nazareth, and Mary treasured all these things up in her heart. And then you have this last little mention here in verse 52 that Jesus, quote, increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and men. Now, this is actually a direct reference to 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 26. And in 1 Samuel 2:26, it refers to the person of Samuel. And if you remember your Old Testament a little bit, Samuel was the last so-called judge of Israel prior to the Israelite kingship being established with King Saul. And in many ways, again, if you know a bit of Old Testament, you know that Samuel is in many ways considered to be the last true godly leader of Israel. There's an argument to be made about people like David or Josiah or Hezekiah, but Samuel is the last one who epitomizes what godly leadership in the proper model is supposed to look like. And here you have this statement being applied to Jesus. And the whole point seems to be, look, godly leadership is returning to Israel, and it's going to happen through Jesus, right? That parallel that's drawn in this verse is intentional. It's trying to show that Jesus is this significant godly leadership figure that's arising in this culture and in this society, and he's going to be very profoundly impactful and lead people back to God. So, again, we look at the story broadly. A few big things to take away from this. The first point we're going to talk about, and I'll tell you the points up front, and then we'll dig into each of them. The first point being, Jesus knew exactly who he was. He knew what his role was from an early age. The second point, Jesus, even though he knew what his role was and how important he was, he still chose an attitude of humility and submission. That's really significant here. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about the irony of Jesus' parents looking for Jesus in all the wrong places. So starting off with this first point, Jesus knew exactly who he was. He knew his role as Christ. He knew that he was the Son of God from a very early age. Now this is called, in the academic world, this is referred to as Jesus' self-knowledge. Okay, what did Jesus know about himself When did he know it? To what extent did he understand it and know it? Right? In verse 49, Jesus referred to the temple, that place where his parents found him. He referred to the temple as, quote, my Father's house. Now, referring to God as your Father, as my Father, that was not a common way of talking about God back then. That's part of why this was so confusing. If he had said, didn't you know I would be in God's house, there would be nothing surprising about this. But he says, didn't you know I would be in my Father's house? Meaning, God was his Father, God the Father, sent Jesus into the world, right? So it creates this relationship. It's this statement of relationship that Jesus the Son has with God the Father. It only makes sense. This statement only makes sense if Jesus knows about his divine identity. Okay? If he understood that he is the Son of God, and if this was something that in this current state of him at 12 years old, if this was something that was already true, that's the only way this statement makes any sense. Now, how does Jesus know this? Some kind of supernatural knowledge? Does Jesus just know everything? At 2 years old, was Jesus capable of doing applied mathematics? Does Jesus just have this knowledge of all things at all time throughout his entire life? Or was there some sort of divine revelation that was given to him? Did he have a vision? Did he have a dream? Or is it just that he knows Scripture really, really well, and he knows his family's background, he knows his history, and he kind of put two and two together, right? He saw the fulfillment of prophecy in his own life, and he knew. We're not really told how Jesus knows. That's not really significant to the story how Jesus knows, but Jesus knows, right? He understands. And that's really important because some have suggested that Jesus, a lot of people are perfectly willing to accept him as a historical figure. They're perfectly willing to say, all right, Jesus existed, but he was just a madman. He's just this man that, was having a middle-age crisis, and somewhere down the line, he just decided, yeah, I'm the Son of God. I'm the Messiah. Why not? That's not the case, right? We see from a very early age, even at 12 years old, this was not some middle-aged fantasy. This was part of his identity that he was aware of and understood profoundly really early on, right? This was a role that he bore and lived out his entire life. He didn't become the Christ. He was always the Christ. He is the Christ. He will always be the Christ, the Messiah, and the Son of the living God. That will always be his identity. He was not always flesh. We know that from John chapter 1, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then in verse 14 it says, and the Word became flesh. So at one time Jesus was not in fleshly form, you could say, but Jesus was always the Son of God. Jesus was always, he always existed, right? So these later claims of divinity, the claims that came later in his life of divinity and Christhood, these aren't arbitrary. It's not some middle-aged fantasy. This is something that he proved to be true in every aspect of his life at every point in his life, which makes his attitude a little surprising, don't you think? Here Jesus was at 12 years old. He knew that he was the Christ. He knew that he was the Messiah. He knew that he was the Son of God. And what is he doing? This is so great. What is he doing as the Son of God at 12 years old? First of all, what were you like at 12 years old? I thought I knew everything at 12. I was convinced that I had a good grasp and a good understanding of the world. And goodness, if I actually did know everything, do you know that the level of temptation to be arrogant and pompous and boast over other people, I mean, I wouldn't have the maturity to deal with that. But here Jesus was at 12 years old, who knew he was the Son of God. And what's he doing? He's listening and asking questions. And that's the second point. Jesus, even though he knew who he was and how important he was, he chose an attitude of submission, right? He chose to ask questions. That's what we see in verse 46. Sitting among the teachers, listening to them, and asking questions. We also get this mentioned later in verse 51. How does it put it? And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. Do you think there was any point when Jesus could have said, you don't know what's better for me. I know what's better for me. I'm the Son of God. Jesus chose to follow God's design for the world and God's design for authority. Part of God's design for authority takes place within the family system where children are supposed to obey their parents. And Jesus, at 12 years old, was a child who was subject to his parents' authority. And it says here that he was submissive to them. What a model for us, right? When Jesus, who is the Son of God, chose to empty himself. This is what Paul talks about in Philippians chapter 2, by the way. In verse 7, he uses the Greek word kenosis. It's this idea of self-emptying. He was in the form of God, and he was in the likeness of God, but he chose to be a servant, right? And that's what Jesus did. Oh, whoops. Sorry, I turned to the wrong page here. Let me catch where I am. Here we are. So, in verse 52, we mentioned how this quote is actually a quote from 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 26. Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Do you notice the fact that it says that he increased in wisdom? I don't think that's an accident. He increased in wisdom. Doesn't that suggest that Jesus, to some degree, perhaps didn't know everything? That throughout his childhood, leading up to his adult life, and ultimately his ministry, there was a time in which Jesus was growing, and he was growing in wisdom and grew in his understanding. And I think that's really significant. And it's kind of hard to understand because we always think about Jesus as this forever all-knowing being, but Jesus, when God chose to become incarnate, when God chose to become flesh in Jesus, that was a sacrificial move, right? And it wasn't just a sacrifice in the sense that he came down and was willing to suffer and die. Of course, that's a big part of it. But there was a sacrifice of will, there's a sacrifice of authority, there's a sacrifice of knowledge, perhaps. So it seems, right? The fact that Jesus increased in wisdom, there is a way or a sense in which God, and I love the way somebody else put it one time, they said God veiled his divinity. He voluntarily chose to veil his divinity, at least to some degree. So Jesus' nature, even from a very early age, was inherently humble and sacrificial. Now, this third point, Jesus' parents, they looked for Jesus in every place but the most obvious. This is what happens to us, by the way. So Jesus' parents, they go back to Jerusalem, and it's either one day or more likely, I think it's 3 days they're searching in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not gigantic. It's probably around 20,000, which was a moderate-sized town for that period. But around 20,000 people, it would have taken them, by my best estimate, and you can actually, there are ways to kind of research this, and you can compare it even to Jonah and what he was doing in Nineveh. Anyway, I'm getting off on tangents. But it probably should have taken them about 1 or 2 days to look through Jerusalem. But it says after 3 days, on the third day they found him, meaning that the temple was probably one of the last places that they looked. They looked for Jesus in every place but the most obvious. And Jesus seems to think that Mary should have known. Didn't you know that I would be in my Father's house? Don't you find that that's what people do today? They look for Jesus in every place but the most obvious. A lot of people have become indifferent or even hostile towards the idea of organized religion in general. And in almost a retaliation to, or I should say kind of a swing of a pendulum to the other direction, people say, well, you know what, I'm just going to do faith by myself. It's just going to be my own personal thing. It's nobody else's business. I'm just going to search for Jesus on my own. And this takes a lot of different forms, but ultimately, one way or another, they end up looking for Jesus outside the church. And most sadly, I think they end up looking for Jesus outside of his word. We're told in the book of John, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to God except through me. And if we don't look for Jesus, we're not going to find God, right? And if we're looking for Jesus in all the places where he isn't, in every place but the most obvious, if we decide, I've had enough of that, there are too many hypocrites in the church, the Bible is this old, outdated book, doesn't have anything to do with me. If we're looking for salvation anywhere else, we're not going to find it. The result of this is that there are a lot of people out there that are trying to do Christianity without Christ. It doesn't work. Which is why it's so important, I think, to get connected with a local church, to meet together with them often, to study, pray, and remain faithfully connected to his word. In 2 Corinthians 6:16, it says, for we are the temple of the living God, as God said, I will make my dwelling among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And in this culture full of Zoom and full of virtual reality and the metaverse and all these different things, it's really tempting to just say, you know what, I'm just going to do it on my own. We're in a community that's more isolated from each other than we ever have been before. And it's really tempting to just say, I'm going to do it on my own. But Jesus can be found in his church. He can be found in his word and in churches that are committed to following his word. Well, I was going to share with you one more passage, but I'm running out of time. I'll just tell you about it real quickly here. In John 14, Jesus also once again brings up his Father's house, this time several years later. He says, in my Father's house there are many rooms. And if I go there to prepare a place for you, I will come back to you and bring you with me also. And that's the promise that he gives to each one of us. If you want to learn more about that, we've got several resources for you. We don't have much time, but we'll go through them real quick here. We've got a Bible correspondence course, or a Bible if you don't have one and need one. If you need any of these resources and would like to participate, you have the contact info there up on the screen. You can go to letthebiblespeak.net for a lot of that information as well, and you can send us a message through there. You can also listen to us on Let the Bible Speak UP on Podbean and Spotify. I want to thank you for joining us today. Well, I hope you have a wonderful week. God bless.
The Father's glory blaze, Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send